What's up, humans? Welcome back to the Human Music Podcast. I'm Luke Rain, and this is episode 66, recording live sounds for electronic music. This week on the Human Music Podcast Live, we talked about recording live studio sounds for electronic music. We talk about mics, instruments, vocals, recording techniques, and even answered some questions from the Dojo TV Discord chat. It is a very good time, and we covered a lot of good stuff that we actually really haven't covered before on this podcast. Please take a moment to support our sponsors, Dojo TV, where we recorded this, and where you can get free producer live stream classes from the Producer Dojo Senseis. The weekly download, where you can learn from Il Gates and his private weekly group lessons and get access to over 230 more episodes in the archive for just $20 a month. And guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. He's hands down the best engineer we know, and your first class over there is free. Those links are down in the below, or just down below. And you can get some, access to more episodes, our socials, free sound packs at thehumanmusicpodcast.com. Plus, there's our song of the week that you hear playing behind me. That is me featuring me, Luke Rain and Trap Jesus. The tune's called Walk on Water. And there's a link for that as well. Appreciate y'all for being here, humans. Let's get on into this episode.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesco with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. What's up, humans? Welcome back to the Human Music Podcast Live,
Yes,
the only podcast that features both humans and music. There is no other one.
There's not a single
We also
one.
don't put a lot of music on this podcast. We just talk about it.
We do chit-chat about it.
We chit-chat.
Mouth noises,
We make monkey mouth noises at these microphones, and the people hear them.
and answer all your favorite monkey music questions
A monkey music podcast.
for humans.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yeah.
That
Big up,
time
chat.
again.
Let's get a what's good in the chat if you are here with us live right now.
Drop me
What's
a good goddamn GIF, son. I want to see some
Yes,
cool
sir.
GIFs in the chat. While you're GIFing up, what are we talking about today, guys? We are talking about adding live recordings to your electronic music.
Yes, sir. How to get more human feeling out of the parts that you're playing, and for anybody that's gotten into electronic music first instead of like playing any kind of instrumentation. If you're finding yourself getting to that point where everything is feeling very like synthesized and artificial and fake, we wanted to just talk about some things that you could think about and try out to get a bit more like humanness element. And we'll talk everything from the theory to the practical side. I feel like the biggest benefit is you get the feel, like I said, but there's some real nerdy stuff that we can get into as well. If anybody in the chat has questions too, if you've tried recording yourself and it didn't come out right, or if you got any specific questions about recording instruments or vocals or anything like that, let us know in the chat. But yeah, I'm excited for this topic. This is something very near and dear to me.
We haven't really
workflow changed a lot,
and we haven't really rinsed this topic too much. There's just so many little avenues to this topic that like I think a lot of people just don't really think of. Even myself, like I like forget to do some little easy stuff that would like be easier to record than like trying to fiddle with it in your computer. Or even if you're just like, this feels stale, like let me add some feel to this, recording something and then, layering it with that thing that you already had, just spice it up a little bit. So we'll go over a few few techniques, few tips, few use cases you might not have thought of. And all good things in the nature of recording.
Yeah, but I guess let's just start at the beginning. How do you get that sound from the world to your computer? Well, you're going to need a couple of things. You're going to need some sort of microphone. And depending on the type of microphone, you're going to need some sort of interface to get that sound into your computer. There are some microphones these days that instead of an XLR cable coming in, you've got a USB. And so often these kind of mics can just record straight into your computer somehow. I've definitely seen some of them that don't talk to DAWs very well, though. So, save your receipt if you're buying a USB microphone for this purpose, just in case, because I've got this little guy called the Revelator right here. It's a little, podcaster mic that I was trying out. As you can see, is not plugged in, and I'm not using it because it doesn't sound very good. But if I had bought this to try and use it with my DAW Reason, I would have been sorely disappointed because it does not actually talk to Reason. Reason does not know how to find it. It does not know how to find Reason. Luckily, that was not at all why I bought it. I bought it to see if it would be a good solution for podcasting, which it wasn't. So, sometimes you might look at a thing like this and think, oh, that's a really good deal, I should buy that. But, do your due diligence, look up some reviews, Google it, with the software you want to use it with, just to make sure nobody's, come up with a problem. Like you Google Revelator mic with Ableton and see if, somebody has any experience using that with that. But generally,
I was going to say generally good process. Yeah. Look, make sure that what you're buying is compatible. But side note, you can even record into literally just the built-in speaker in your computer. Like on my Mac laptop, I've recorded many a little one-shot or bits of stuff that we're going to be talking about just straight into the laptop mic. If it's That's not impressive. I'm not the only one.
I'm surprised the fan doesn't overpower it. If you can do that on a Mac, then all the Mac users out there, that's a huge gem, because I definitely can't do that on mine.
I mean, you can even record straight into your iPhone. Might actually even be better quality.
Yeah,
that's
I
an
as
awesome
well.
trick.
But I do a lot of field recordings and Foley stuff, or just laying down an idea, and then I'll take it in from the iPhone and drop it in. But we'll circle back around to the iPhone in a second. Just make sure if anybody's new, you're going to need some sort of digital to analog interface. It's analog in the world and it's digital in your computer, and you need to convert it. So having some sort of interface, a lot of people, like to use Scarlett is a brand. I see a lot of producers rocking the little 2i2. I know Tesco's got the SSL, similar version of the same idea. A lot of people like to spend a lot of money and go with the universal audio stuff. Personally, I've got this old clunker that I've been rocking for 8 years that Reason actually made and then immediately discontinued. There's a lot of right answers for how to get it. There's a lot of good ones, but you're going to need some sort of interface.
Totally. So one thing to think about too is what you're going to be recording, first off, how professional you want it to feel. And also, I like the topic that we just brought up on using your iPhone and whatever you have available to you, because I think one of the huge benefits of recording stuff and having to process more raw audio is that you get more imperfections out of it. So definitely, if you want to record nice acoustic guitar or vocals or whatever, definitely look into getting a solid interface with a good preamp and a good mic. Otherwise, if you want to just start injecting stuff today, tomorrow into your music, definitely use whatever you got on your phone and try to really embrace the imperfections of it. I think one thing as producers, we get too caught up in how to get cleaner mixes, how to produce better sounds, how to do better this, how to do better that. And in that pursuit, you lose that like human element to it, and that's why we wanted to go into it on this episode, because it's not very obvious sometimes that you should make things a teensy bit shittier or embrace the bad characteristics of it. But you'll notice your music will sound very lifeless without this kind of articulation. And also, if you don't normally mess with it, you might find that you're lacking textures in your music too, because everything is coming from the same sound source, So, I personally use a combination of both. If I'm doing something more fancy and upfront and clean in the mix, I'll do it on here. But if I ever have like a rhythm that's just going on in my head and I got a table around or I got a guitar around, learning how to use the microphone on this thing has been one of the most useful things. And I think for anybody starting, you should be aware of what the proximity effect is. That's probably the most useful thing when it comes to whatever recording setup. Anybody that's taken a lesson with me knows I go super ham into this, but basically it's like it's just the concept that the closer the sound source is to the observer, in this case the microphone was picking up the signal, is going to have more low end just naturally the closer I am, versus the further back I move, the less low end. And you want to make sure that you're getting like a decent enough distance from whatever instrument you're playing or whatever, so that you're not getting this like disproportional kind of low end. I think that's the one like real piece of advice that I'd say, regardless of what setup you have, researching into the proximity effect and just reading up on like some of the finer details of it, looking into like what kind of pickup pattern your mic has, stuff like that, are all like very very good like nerd rabbit holes to go down.
Yeah,
kind of escapes the whole topic of today, but good to know.
You made a really
I think it's important.
yeah, I agree. Not really.
Cool.
But you made a really good point, and that is like, you have to think of the use case, right? So like the more you're going to process it, like even if you just like pitch it down, like the quality originally doesn't have to be that perfect, because it's not like people expecting the unfiltered, clean version of whatever it is, right? And if you're going to do even more creative processing on it, like, a bunch of interesting techniques, chorus, downsample, reverb, all that stuff, then you can hide even more of those like not perfect pieces of your recording, right? So you just have to think about what you're going to use it for, and then, take that level of precision for what you're doing, right? So I think a good place to start would be maybe our favorite ways to use recorded bits in our own music. And I'll start with one that kind of ties into what we were just talking about. So like an offbeat chant in your music, right? So like something in the background, like in dubstep, everyone has like the uhs and heys and stuff.
Hey.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of grabbing that same one that you've heard in every other song, that getter chant, that Kashmir one shot, like literally just record 3 versions of you going, and then pitch them down 5 semitones, alternate them, add a little bit of compression, maybe some reverb, and then it does it. Honestly, that element in particular is one that I would say doesn't matter what you record it through, because it's not like up front. It's in the background anyways. You're going to pitch it down. You're going to throw some reverb on it. But it's like the simplest one for you to actually like get in the pocket of your song and get the right tonality. I can't tell you how many times like in that beginner intermediate production phase, I was like scrolling through millions of one-shot vocals, just like, where's the that I want? Like, where's the that like is long enough and like sounds right? Like,
yeah, they got an ooh and an ah, but where's
right
the
Yeah, like stop doing that. Just hit record.
The was inside the whole time.
Do 3 takes
inside of you.
And and even if you want to do like one that is very audible and like make it nice, just record 3 layers of you doing it the exact same way, and then stack those, compress them together, pitch them all around. Maybe one's 5 down, one's 12 down, one's 12 up. Compress them all together, distort them, add a little bit of reverb. You got a big old fat stack of uhs.
Totally.
Shout out to
Um,
Master P.
I just want to address some of the questions here. So Mike was asking thoughts on double tracking. I know it's important in rock and pop, but is it also the case for electronic genres? Something that helps me think about this idea is if you sound design, think of what a saw wave sounds like versus a super saw. Much more lush, much more wide, much more lush.
And the way you
It's
make
like-
a super saw is by taking two saw waves and slightly detuning them from each other. And it gives you this really cool effect. And similarly, when you double track, say, a vocal, when you lay down one take of it and then lay down a second take of it, the second take is not going to be identical to the first in its waveform. It's going to be really similar, but add to that kind of, it's literally, I mean, the effect is called a chorus effect because it sounds like a bunch of people doing the same thing, which is a chorus.
Exactly.
Totally.
I would say my rule of thumb for like double tracking, am I recording something that needs to be wide? Because if you do need to have that thing be wide, recording one take, you're going to really struggle to use enough chorus and stereo wideners and time-based effects, Haas effect. All of that stuff removes impact from the sound at the sake of width, right? But if you record the exact same thing twice and pan them hard left and right, then you have natural full stereo width without having to try at all, right? That's the reason guitars are typically tracked wide, because you want them, full width so the vocal can sit in the center, and you also want them like thick and beefy, right? So it makes sense to record them twice, sometimes even four times, and quad track them. But really, I would just think, like, rule of thumb for that, I would say, like, do you need it to be wide? Do you need it to be like all the way out there? Then if yes, record it twice. If no, just leave the one. It's fine.
And take it on a case-by-case basis. Like, for example, if you want to put a clap in your track, what sounds better? Just one clap or like a group of claps? You could record yourself clapping for like 40 seconds and then take every 4 claps, chop them into a loop, and then just layer them on top of each other. And then you've got a whole group clap where the timing and tone differences are just slightly different. If you wanted to, you could pan those around and get a nice wide field. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do, but experiment.
Yeah, exactly. Like experimenting with it and knowing the context, like double tracking and layering in general is something that's very often used because it gives you a different kind of way to express that idea. One thing I just, tell you to think about is like, ask yourself, what section are you moving into or moving away from? If you're moving from like an intro into a verse, maybe you want just that single tracked layer that's a bit more mono in that section. And then when the verse kicks in, then you have like a double tracked layer and it feels like it blossoms out, right? Or maybe you want it to pull in and you just have one layer and you might have some like slight stereo effect just to get it moving a bit so it's not stale. All of these are different tools in your arsenal, and every single layer you add to a certain extent is going to make the sound bigger. And then the same way in a movie, you don't have the character the most developed at the beginning of the movie and regress. You want to have some sort of logical progression as well with your layers, with your double tracking, stuff like that.
Yeah. And another thing that just popped into my head with like, you want some stuff to be huge, you want some stuff to be small. Like in the use case we were just talking about, where like maybe your recording setup is not very quality, or you just want to like have a good differentiation, like make it like intentionally bad. Like maybe you like talk through your hand into your phone speaker to make it like really, or like leave yourself a voicemail and then play that voicemail into the computer, and it's like this like talking through the phone, downsampled, terrible quality for your intro, and then all of a sudden it like opens up into like full quality, and that comparison, that difference is going to sound really cool.
You know what I've even heard of people doing back when I was producing a lot of metal, for getting realistic drum acoustics for sampled drums. They would literally just bring a speaker into like a big stairwell or something, and then blast the track, record the reverb, and then bring that back into the DAW. So they have like a drum room sound.
That's amazing.
There's a lot of really cool shit you can do.
Like that. Similar to like Capitol Records, that iconic round building in Hollywood has like these big echo chambers underground where they were like had it built to do that, and they have like you can buy reverb emulations with the convolution impulses recorded in those chambers.
So cool. See, that's one thing that's super inspiring about like having your phone around is if you go to a space like that and you just do like a vocal ooh or something and you record it, like, I don't know, man. Maybe not everybody's like this, but my mind doesn't turn off music when I'm out other places. So when I hear some cool shit, it's my way of being like, all right, I got one sample. I've been productive today, you know, like I'm gonna try and capture this location that I was in today and try to capture the beauty of this particular spot, what sounds nice about it, and bring that into the DAW and see what I can do with that. It just adds a certain kind of magic. But so Lullaby here in the chat is asking, shout out Abe, which rappers use their iPhone to record. We might have been talking about this before, man, but it's not coming to mind if I told you someone specific. But if you guys check out Lauv, Lauv on YouTube, he's a huge pop star. You've definitely heard his shit on the radio. And he's got a couple behind the scenes videos where he shows you some of his biggest hits were just recorded on his iPhone. He just had like random ideas, recorded a little like vocally riff, brought him back into, or I think he just like airdropped it into his DAW and like started the song that way. And that's like a multi millions of plays.
Dude, another
couple of songs he did there.
That's like perfect use case for this. The other thing that I just remembered is like there's some really good free auto-tune apps for your phone. Because I saw some videos, someone like auto-tuned their dog, and I was like, what? And like I was going through the comments and someone's like, oh yeah, it's like this app. And so I like downloaded it and it works really well. You can download, oh God, I gotta find it now if I'm gonna start talking about this stuff. I will find it after I stop talking. But it worked really well. You can choose like different keys and different styles and like add reverb. And like I had so much fun just screwing around with that. Like I haven't actually used it, but now that I remembered that it exists, I probably will. But like you could like record yourself doing a terrible vocal run into the auto-tune app in the key of your song and then just like distort it, reverb it, filter it out, and have like a really interesting, like ethereal texture in the background that you never would have thought to make. And just record like 10 of them and be like, these 9 suck. This one, these 3 notes sound really sick. And yeah, there's so many little bits that you can do with your phone alone.
Yeah. I mean, famously, Kanye has gone to print with iPhone vocals. Ill Gates brings that up in his workshop sometimes. Like,
really?
Yeah. I mean, like he'll lay down the idea on his iPhone, and then they'll import it into the track to build the track around, and then later they'll try to re-record it and be like, nah, you know what? Actually, like the original, it captured the emotion. Like, okay, maybe it's a little lo-fi, but like throw a little extra saturation on it, and now it sounds intentional. You know? Like similarly, like my track "Walk on Water" that I originally did for Evan's "Get Outside" mixtape back in the day, and then re-released last year, this year, is the vocal on that is done on my phone in an untreated, reverby room. Like it was just like my homie's office. I happened to be in Dallas when I was starting that track, and I was just, oh, hey, here's a cool little idea. I got an idea for the lyric. And I sang falsetto into my phone, emailed it to myself, opened it up on my computer, dropped it in, thinking, yeah, as soon as I get home and I have a real mic, I'll just replace this. But that was like a week and a half later. And by that time, the song was basically done, and I already liked it. It worked. I had done some processing to it where I like did a pitch shifted layer and then a little bit of distortion and then like a little compression. And I was like, I already like how it sounds. Like I don't need to replace this because it's working exactly in the space it needs to in the mix. And, you know, like you get those happy accidents sometimes and just say thank you. But
Totally.
yeah. You guys got something?
Yeah, I found the app. It's called Voloco, VOLOCO.
Oh, they have a cool auto tune.
I'm definitely gonna get that.
There's like, obviously it asks you to buy a subscription, but you don't have to. And then there's some like standard tuning effects that work really well.
Nice. Yeah, there's a lot of cool phone apps. Like for the iPhone, there's another one called Spire. What the Spire is this little like thing here from Isotope. For the audio only people, it looks like, say, I don't know, maybe for you Canucks, a few hockey pucks stacked on top of each other, and with a little like play and record button on top and a little meter. And it's got a built-in mic. You can plug in actual mics, and it's got phantom power in the back. And then it has a phone app that can control it. But one of the coolest, and you could do 8-track, like multi-track recordings on your phone. You can bring a beat into it if you want. You can, set a metronome and have your headphones on and record to a click. But I often I get an idea, and I'll often lay it down using this, or even just the phone app. And one of the cool things about the phone app is there's a free version of it that you can just download even if you don't have the hardware, and do 8-track multi-tracking software, or, do a bunch of different Foley recordings and just mute the other tracks. And then you can send yourself the stems. It's really, and they make it really easy to email yourself the stems or the finished track, or you can upload like straight to SoundCloud too. So there's a lot of good options with that. And I find it like, obviously everybody says, oh yeah, make sure you have your voice notes. We all know about like humming that bass line for that song you're going to write later into the voice notes. But like, this is the best voice notes program I've ever had, because it's a simplified studio, like it's even got a little mixing section where if you push the little dot representing that track towards the top, it gets louder and you can pan them left to right. Like, it's really cool. And they've got effects in there if you have the pro version, where you can like, it's got like guitar amp emulations and different like vocal effects with reverbs and delays and stuff. It's really dope.
Yep. So hey, Goosetronics is asking any suggestions for writing MIDI notes like a guitar would be played. It's kind of like not against the topic we're talking about today, but it's kind of like goes, kind of off course from what we're trying to talk about. But if we were to sum it down with what we talked about so far, make it more imperfect, more timing imperfections, more velocity imperfections, all that stuff. And I'd highly suggest you actually try to play it in, or find maybe a guitar player online or something, and bring them into your DAW and notice what do the timing imperfections look like when they play 8th notes versus 16th notes? Are they evenly distributed across? What do the waveforms look like? All that kind of stuff. Like, bring it into your DAW and check it out. But like I said, we're talking more about recording, and I think something that you could do that could be cool in this case, if maybe you can't play guitar, is like stitch it together and then use MIDI to supplement the part that you already played in. That can also be really cool. But yeah, honestly, editing MIDI can be very tedious sometimes.
Yeah, honestly, to throw a quick answer on that one, it's almost impossible to get what you're looking for by doing it in MIDI. You're just not going to be able to make the MIDI note. Like, you can't simulate an upstroke in MIDI. What you want to do instead is, like, say you were playing like a 16th note rhythm and you like want them to play up and down, like use an LFO and make it an 8th note rhythm, and then have 2 notes and like change the envelope for like the first and the second half of that, so that you have like the first note is like more percussive, it's stronger. If you think about someone like strumming down on the guitar, it's like more emphasized, and then the upstroke is like a little bit more muted, a little quieter, and a little less like oomph to it. So you'd like round off the envelope on that second one a little bit. And then as you play that, if you were doing a synth bass that you wanted to feel more like guitar plucking, that's like the closest way that I would recommend doing that. But again, like Tesco was saying, yeah, you're still not going to really get that close. And in the case of like something like, you know, a 16th note rhythm on a guitar, like you don't have to be a virtuoso to just be able to play that in. And you'd be surprised how much you can splice together guitar takes if you do it in DI before an amp, and get away with making it sound like a single take. So even like for a while, like when I still sucked at guitar, I would still record stuff in and just like produce my way out of it before I could actually play like a whole take that was good.
Yeah.
You don't need to be that good to make it work.
The better producer you become at being able to audio edit and understand like groove and rhythm by reading the waveform, the better you're going to seem as a vocalist or an instrumentalist, for sure. Like being able to comp together your own takes and just like, all right, I'm just going to jam this loop that I want for like 5 minutes and then just take the best couple and then like splice in from other loops those moments that didn't quite work as good. You know, like you can get away with a lot that people that is inaudible in the final product.
Totally. And you can use it to your advantage too. Like your path is your path. Like work with what you have because it's going to yield results that nobody else is going to get to because they haven't taken the exact steps you have, you know? Speaking of DI, I believe it was Evan Styler asking
not Evan,
about
Even Styler.
Even.
Dude, that is so funny because my name is Evan and people will spell it EVEN sometimes. And so like reading that is just fucking hilarious to me because the fact that it goes both ways is just incredulous.
That's funny because I even scrolled up just to make sure I got it wrong. Yeah, just to make sure I got it wrong.
You did, don't worry.
Perfect. So he's asking about DI bass. So, excuse me. One thing when it comes to low end, things in the real world that have a lot of mass have a lot of power to them, and it takes a lot of power to produce low end frequencies. So that's one. And then you have the proximity effect of the microphone. If I'm moving in closer and further away, the biggest changing factor here is the amount of low end. So low end is not only directed or is correlated to the weight of the track, it's also correlated to where it sits in the field of depth. So right off the bat, you need to compress pretty heavily so that your bass levels aren't jumping up and down. It's going to fuck with how the depth of that section feels throughout if you have like a very big dynamic range there.
And if you're just doing it DI like straight into the quarter-inch jack on your interface, like it's honestly pretty simple. DI bass is like quite straightforward. Just like saturate and compress to taste. I mean, if you wanted a big beefy tone, like you'd be talking like 20 dBs of saturation drive. If you just wanted to make it loud enough, just a little bit of saturation and compression. But for the most part, it's quite straightforward. The biggest thing is the saturation to make it feel not as sterile. If you don't have a preamp to run it through, saturation, maybe throw the amp on, the amp effect at like 10% or the pedal effect at a small percentage if you want it to be a bit more gritty.
Yeah, and also dip out like some of the nasty like clunky frequencies that kind of sit in that vocally range around like 1K. But if you're just doing straight up, honestly, I'd even recommend just do a bass straight DI, compress that a bit of saturation, and then one plugin that I really like to use for if I want just like a nice thick kind of rock or metal bass, or just something more natural feeling. If you're on Windows, get it's called Modern Deathcore. It's a free VST. It's a distressor emulation of like some like well-known distressor. Honestly, just crank the input on that. It'll give you a very nice like color to the bass, and then just EQ to taste. You know, make sure it's sitting in the bass region. Take out any highs that don't need to be there. Saturate a bit, and really that's all you need. Just make sure you tame those dynamics and just beef it up a bit, and you're set.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, sir. Modern deathcore.
Modern deathcore. All right. Is that kind of like new metal?
It's yeah, something like that, you know.
Yeah.
We got Mike.
Yeah, we got a question about how much can you deviate from the grid but still be in the pocket? Good question, Mike E, aka Camel Hotline. I mean, as you can deduce from the question, you know, the grid and the pocket are not the same thing. The grid is mathematically exact divisions of a bar, but the pocket is dependent on the song. It's part of the groove of the song. And the pocket kind of defines like where off of the grid do things happen to make this groove uniquely this groove. So the simple answer is a lot, depending on the groove. Like you can get way off the grid and still have it work. But remember, there's other divisions in the grid, like triplets, for example, where you get, you know, you push late enough off the grid, you just get onto a different grid. And so like a fully swung rhythm is where you take like a 16th note off of the 16th note and move it over to the right to the 16th note triplet. And there's all sorts of different like shuffles and swings in between those, and you can even go later than that and see what happens. My best advice would be to experiment with it. Like, you know, make a little drum beat, grab all of your percussions and start shoving them over later. What happens when they're 10 milliseconds later, 20, 30, 40, 50? Somewhere it's going to sound cooler than at other places. Like, oftentimes, like I know Il Gates has kind of his rule of thumb is like pushing it to the right by like, you know, the hats and percussions by say about 30 milliseconds, whereas like the kicks will be say 10 milliseconds late and the snares will be right on the grid. I think that's exactly how his Infinite Drum Rack is currently set up in its latest iteration, right?
Yeah, one of the things you said, just like one of the simplest, cleanest sounding like swung grooves literally is just taking that 16th note and bumping it to the right till it lands on the next triplet, and then just take every note that would land on that 16th and move it over to that triplet you know,
if you quantize to shuffle, that is what's happening.
Yeah, just whatever you do, you want to make sure that all of the swing of all of your instruments and drums is nearly the same. That's really the most important part. And, you know, kind of tying it back into the concept today, like frequently, like if I hear like an interesting rhythm in my head, like it's really easy to just record and go boom, put, ch, to put, ch, to put, ch, put, ch, put, ch, put. And then, like, as long as you try and make sure that, like, the sounds that you're making have, like, a defined transient, like, you could tell I was really trying to emphasize, like, the front of those, then you literally can just go into Ableton and extract that groove, and it'll give you a MIDI template for where the transients in what you just recorded land, and then you can apply that groove to anything else. An audio recording, a MIDI synth. And so that's a really easy way to get something in the pocket instead of trying to click and drag stuff into the pocket, which is like fake pocket. It's not real pocket. Real pocket comes from like feel. Like you can land on real pocket by like
gatekeeping pocket now.
Yes, we are gatekeeping pocket. You can land on real pocket by shifting stuff around, and I do all the time. But it is way easier if you hear something in your head or you want something to feel really natural to just do the groove in audio and then extract it and assign it to everything.
Amen.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the best places to break out real live instrumentation or live recording, even if you're not recording an instrument, is for those like foundational groove elements of your tune early on in the writing. Like finding out, like, you know what? Ooh, you know, like, say you got a really cool loop from a pack that's an actual djembe player, an actual like skilled tambourine player doing this really cool groove, and you're like, oh, that's awesome. I'm going to make a whole song based on that because I really like that groove. You could do that for yourself, and it's generally a lot easier, you know, than trying to get this like perfect, like moving little MIDI notes all over the place and trying to, you know, shoehorn digital into feeling human. Is like, just have little things around, like just right here. I've got this tiny little drum I found for $5 at Goodwill, and done, recorded. There it is. It's in the world. I could sample this podcast. You could sample this podcast and use that little drum recording. It's definitely not perfect on any grid because there wasn't one. There was no click when I was playing it. You know, it's going to be slightly off. It's probably going to be really near some BPM, but it's going to be, you know, it's you squeeze it into the grid, and then the imperfections are what make that a pocket.
I think that's a perfect segue into a question that Mike asked. He was asking, I mentioned reamping sample drums. If you were to reamp other virtual instruments, what's the gain structure like? How much headroom should there be? And then there was another question, which I feel like is kind of related as well, from New Maps asking, I really like to use my Zoom H1 to record impulse responses for cool reverbs from real spaces. What are some ways I can use this for dancier tracks without it getting too messy or having too much bleed? So I have 2 notes on this, and then I'm curious to hear if you guys agree, disagree, what you think on the topic. The first one, I think you're overthinking all of this gain staging stuff and all of the technical stuff. And what you should be asking yourself instead, because I ran into this issue, and I see so many students run into this issue when they come to do sessions with me. If you're making very soft, lush indie pop or R&B or something like that, you should be very, very concerned with your gain staging and making sure that all of those are very finely dialed. All those settings are finely dialed on the softer side. If you're making something like dubstep or aggressive bass music, you should not be taking old boomer advice on like classic rock shit and trying to apply that to a very aggressive genre, because there are genres that heavily rely on clipping, for example. And who am I to tell you that you should record this reverb in this particular space at this volume if it doesn't suit the track, right? So if you got a really aggressive feeling track, maybe you can get away with a bit more grit and dirt and maybe even some clipping, right? Versus if you're doing something softer, you know, all of that stuff is going to be much more pronounced. Now, to relate it to New Map's question, ways to use this for dancier tracks. So one thing I find really useful for these cases where you're resampling like reverbs and stuff, have your dry and your wet in parallel and have them at 100% each, so that you can mute your dry chain and hear just how the reverb sits in the mix. And then you can EQ just the reverb tail to sit nicely in the mix. And then once you know the reverb itself fundamentally doesn't have any clashing frequencies, you've cleaned it up so that it sits in the space that is available in that mix, then bring your dry signal in and rebalance them to each other. I find that to be the absolute best trick, because the thing is, there's not going to be any one impulse response or any one like room size or reverb setting, any preset, nothing like that, that fits perfectly to my track. even if I use the built-in EQ in the stock reverb, I normally need to add like one more EQ after just to shape it exactly how I want. And I find it easiest to do that when my dry wet isn't affecting two levels at the same time. And I have just my dry and my wet, and then I can level them individually into the mix and together after.
Yeah, I just want to put an underline on that. EQ your reverbs, filter your reverbs. It's very helpful.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't. Anytime I'm adding reverb to something important, it's almost always in parallel, so that I can do just that, and probably sidechain it to the dry signal as well.
Yeah, that is
at least a little bit. Plus, I just like having the single variable selection and being able to, as a dry wet, it's basically turning two knobs at once, right? Turning one up and one down. And I want the reverb just like a dB louder. My ape brain can't conceive of how many percentage points that is on a dry wet knob. But if I want the reverb a tiny bit louder, it's really easy to just take that parallel chain and bump it up a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, that wet dry knob isn't always your friend, especially if the element that you're putting reverb on needs to be a lead. I know this is kind of getting into the weeds off of our general topic, but the shit is important.
Helpful information.
Yeah. I want to talk about microphones because we've talked about, hey, you can use all these different kinds of microphones, but I think our topic would be incomplete if we don't talk about like the basic microphone types that people will come across. Like this mic that I am talking on right now and the one Evan's using, it's the same mic. It's a Shure SM7B. This is a dynamic mic, similar to, but a little classier than, like, say, an SM57, which is like a classic like guitar or snare drum mic, or an SM58, which is a classic stage vocal mic. Like, you ever seen anybody rapping or singing rock on a stage? Hands down, 90% of the time it was an SM58, and the guitar and the drummer probably had SM57s all over them. So dynamic mics work just, as simple as it can. Air moves, it moves the mic that goes into wherever the sound is going. The other most common type is a condenser mic, and condenser mics work on basically the same principle of, moving air and picking it up, but they're a lot more sensitive and they require power. They require what's called phantom power. This 48 volt power that allows the mic to work. Like, if you don't turn this power on, no sound will happen. Very important. Many of you probably already know this, but if anybody didn't, just wanted to throw that out there. Like, for example, I've got this other mic over here. It's inside of my Chaotica eyeball, but it is the Shure Baby Bottle. That is a condenser mic. It is, for certain things in certain situations, condenser mics are better. A lot of vocal mics for studio recording are condenser mics, but one of the problems with them is they pick up everything. Like, if you record a condenser mic, if I had that condenser mic right here and this dynamic mic right here and recorded me talking into them both at the same distance, the condenser mic would pick up way more of my computer fan and way more of my chair squeaking and little things like that. So if you want super fine detail in a recording and you have a really quiet space, condenser mic could be the way to go. A lot of other situations, though, a dynamic mic's actually a better move, especially if you don't have a great space to record in.
Yeah, I got to be honest. If I had to pick one mic to record with the rest of my life, it would definitely be this one. I'm not sponsored by Shure. I should be for this endorsement I'm about to give, but it literally does everything well. For recording the voice, I haven't tried to record, guitar through an amp into it. It'd probably do that all right. But the ability to have it sound good up close, far away, screaming into it, doing really soft up close stuff. Like, I always hated how recordings of my voice sounded on even exact same price point condenser mic. I could never get it to sound like what I wanted it to, rich, full. It just never had enough low end, and my voice has too much like low mids, mid range, like that honkiness area. And so I just always like the nasally bit was just way too much. Like I always just hated how it sounded. And I absolutely love this mic. And you could record outside in the wind, and it would hardly pick it up. Like it just works really well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So use whatever you got. If you only got certain type of mic on hand, don't worry about, oh no, I got to go buy this expensive mic over here. Use what you got and then listen to the recording and be like, okay, what does this sound like? What does it need? Sometimes I'll make specific decisions. Well, I really like the take I got, but the recording's a little messed up. Are there any effects I can put on this that will mask the fact that this recording is imperfect and make it feel intentional that there's noise in here? Maybe, there's like a little bit of clipping on the recording or something, and then you just like put a little extra distortion on there so it feels like the clipping is part of that distortion. Just do what you can.
Yeah, I see Even is saying he has a super shitty condenser mic. It's a thing. I would encourage you to see it as a tool that has like a specific character to it, like that is definitely something you could build a whole sound and career off of if you just get the time to learn it. Like that's why we're really harping on this point of like, yeah, it's cool to have all the high end stuff and to know all these like really minute like differences. It's not even minute, it's really important. I'm not even gonna lie, but you not having that piece of gear is not what is gonna hold you back from making that song better or from developing yourself as an artist. Like you can make a iPhone work just like you can make the shitty condenser work, and you might find like a dynamic mic would not have been as good for recording ambiences or something. And now that's your go-to mic anytime you hop on the bus or you're going somewhere. That picks up like every single noise. And it's nice and even. You can throw it in your track. And it's apparently a piece of shit, so you're not going to worry about losing it. All of that. That's such a valuable tool to have in your arsenal. Like, definitely start messing with that mic more.
Yeah, and you also asked a really good question. You asked if condensers are directional, though. Well, every single mic has a different pattern. They've all got their pattern. There are some very common patterns. Some mics are omnidirectional. Some are very directional, but it is not a function of whether it's a condenser or a dynamic mic. Between condensers and dynamics, they each have all the types of patterns. Like this one, the pattern is this direction that this mic points is where it comes from. Same as like, say like this one here. This is another dynamic mic. It's an Audix OM2. And again, like just this front area that I would sing or rap into is the only direction that it's picking up. And this back area, it is not specifically, because otherwise the monitors on stage would feed back and it would sound terrible to everybody. And then this blue mic over here, this baby bottle I've got, this direction right here, the front of this mic is the only direction it works on. If I accidentally turned that mic around backwards and sang into the back of it, my shit would sound many decibels quieter, probably like 15 decibels quieter, because it specifically works on what's called a cardioid pattern. It's kind of, shaped like a heart, where it's like, you'll see it's like on the back of the microphone, there's nothing coming in, but then around the front, there's a lot more volume coming in. But yeah, so just depends mic to mic. Usually you want a directional mic in most, some sort of directional mic in most situations, just because, if you're recording, say, in a room full of other musicians or on stage with a room full of other musicians, or, there's speakers on that stage with you, you only want that mic to pick up what it's directly pointed at and not the rest of the stuff. Whereas, say, you're trying to just record the general ambiance of the whole band being in a room, you would probably want more of like an omnidirectional mic to pick up all of the sounds from every direction. Or some people will use like a pair of directional mics, point one this way and one that way, and get a stereo room sound out of it. So there's a lot of different mic patterns, pickup patterns, and just when you're researching what mic you want to buy, just look, or if you happen to have a mic, figure out what its pattern is by Googling it.
But yeah, 100%. To just add on that, like he said, he was thinking that condensers were directional. They kind of are, but I would think of just like layman's terms, like condensers are more like 180 degrees directional for the most part. Like most things in front of it, like you could be to the side of it and it's still going to pick it up, like most of it up. It's obviously going to be louder if you're straight into it, but like a dynamic mic, it's like you want to go right into it. Whereas like a condenser will pick up a little bit more on the sides, like kind of a semicircle in front of it.
In general,
but yeah, exactly. In general, like you said though, it depends mic to mic. So Slapzilla was saying, any thoughts on using expensive noise reduction audio software like Isotope RX?
Shouts to Slapzilla for asking so many good questions. We've got a few episodes from you lately. Thank you, Slapzilla.
Slapzilla with the slappers, just absolute slappers of questions. So my 2 cents on that is, like, if you were an audio engineer by trade and you don't have the ability to change the recording given to you, that's probably a must, because you're not going to get a perfect recording every time. There's going to be more room noise in this one, and maybe this one's got some clicks and pops and stuff. You gotta work with the recording you're given. For a producer who's recording your own stuff, save the money and buy the right microphone for yourself. That would be my 2 cents. To sum it up, right? Because if you're the one that's in charge of the recording and you can get multiple takes to make sure it's the right one, and you understand the type of recording you need to get to the final product that you're looking for, you're just always going to be better off getting a good recording to start with. Like we've said on this podcast before, it's really tough to polish a turd. It's almost impossible, really. Isotope RX is actually quite good at polishing vocal turds, but it's not perfect.
Other kind too.
And it's probably going to be just way less work in the end to get a good recording to start with, and then just work from that.
That's absolutely the best advice. But that being said, Isotope RX is great software. Like, you can buy they've got different levels. Even the Elements has some really good stuff in it, and they often put it on sale for pretty cheap. And if like Evan said, if you're an audio engineer and people are coming and paying you money and expecting great results, it's a very, very good investment for you.
Yeah. And I was even going to add, like, if your room is just the worst room in the world and like you can't get a good recording because of your room, like, yeah, maybe. But then also, like, this dynamic mic that I'm talking into right now, like, I would probably take this mic in the worst room in the world over like an okay mic or shitty mic in the best room in the world with Isotope RX. Like, it like, you're just going to end up with a better product.
Yeah, I think too, like, depending on how shit your situation is, it honestly might even be better to just lean into the imperfections. Like, don't keep trying to swim up current if it's just a losing battle. Like, you might find that by leaning into it, maybe you have a very like spacious room that ends up being like a signature part of your sound. Maybe you figure out how to do some ad-libs by standing a couple feet away or something like that. That really ends up becoming like a core part of your style. So just because somebody said on a tutorial, you have to do things this way. Just, take everything with a grain of salt. Ask yourself always, like, first and foremost, is this in line with the vibe I'm going for? Regardless of gain staging, regardless of any of that technical stuff, it's like, does this just sound how I want it to sound? Does this reverb sound lush with the type of music I'm making? If it's lush music, does it sound more aggressive and like closed in and intimate if it's more in your face music, so on, and come back to the feel, and don't get too caught up in like the technical stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like imperfections. I know. I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but like it took me personally so long to come back to recording myself because I was over processing stuff and I was trying to get it to sound too perfect. And when I started embracing that little bit of static noise and ambience in the background when I would record guitar takes or vocal takes or whatever, and started accepting the shittiness as a part of the character of it, I found it just added a dimension to my music that I couldn't get no matter how many hours I spent perfecting things and surgically EQing it and adjusting MIDI notes to get the same result. It's just not the same.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Like if you record in a garage that's concrete everywhere with no soundproofing, like lean into that. Like make everything that you record sound punk as shit. And like you made it in a garage and overly distort it and lean into that like messiness. And then combine that with like a really thick, like high quality like synth bass sound or 808 or something underneath it, and then just figure out ways to balance those things out to add to the texture of your song. And like exactly what you said, lean in to your setup, lean in to your available tools and bring them in and embrace them as part of your sound. And it's ultimately you're going to stand out and sound more original because of it if you lean into that, and authentically representing like what you're doing in the space that you are, like it's going to sound more authentic. It's going to sound more cool, more effortless without trying. And ultimately that's what wins every time.
I heard the Roots recorded one of their albums. I think it was Things Fall Apart, literally like in a hallway in like a project tenement building. And
sick.
Like put the whole band in there and mic'd the shit up and just like rocked with it. And like, that album sounds great, like as a work of art, as, engineering critiques. Yeah, I'm sure you could tear it apart, in later albums of theirs where they had bigger budgets and went to real studios, sound cleaner. But people fucking love that album. And some of the people that love that album don't like their cleaner ones as much because they're like, nah, I love the gritty, raw realness of that. Like, I love the fact that there was that weird little extra reverb on Black Thought's voice while he was rocking. So, like I've been saying, lean into it, find a way to make it work. Know your tools that you have on hand and adjust accordingly.
Yeah, think about in real life, too, like, people connect more with other human beings when they see imperfections in them. When everybody is just too happy-go-lucky all of the time and they're trying to hide that side, it just comes off as ingenuine and you never quite get to know that person as in depth. But as soon as you see the good and the bad side of somebody, it gives you more, like depth, dimension to their character. And same with your music. Like, if the only appealing thing of your song is how clean the mixdown is, like, I'm sorry, but people just don't care. It might be cool for audio engineers to nerd out to, but your everyday listener has never even heard of Headroom, for example. They just want to know, how does this guitar make me feel? How does this vocal make me feel? Like,
yes.
Man, I think XXX Tentacion was such a great example of this. Or like in his early days, and I won't even say I'm like a super fan, but I have so much respect because in the early days, what attracted people to him was the fact that he was just able to get that emotion across in the recording. and the recording quality itself wasn't great, but the way everything came together, it really helped like complete the image. And I think if he had like crispy, clean mix downs and all that back in those days, it would not have been the same package. It doesn't make sense. So like, I don't want to get too far off topic, but literally anything you do, whether it's your mixes, your masters, all that stuff, there is no correct way. It just needs to be like relatively in this ballpark where all of the other music is, so that listeners are familiar with that sound. But as far as the rules themselves go, like you're not going to get closer to a correct mix down, but you are going to find your way of achieving punchy drums. You're going to find your way of leveling your sub right. You're going to find your way of getting the frequency distribution right. All of these things play into your sound the same way your recording choices do, what kind of equipment you're using. Like, nothing is better or worse. You literally just have a blank canvas that you need to fill with sound and make it sound interesting and full. And you can do that with shitty audio. You could do that with pristine audio. You could do that with silence. Do that with totally recorded sounds. You could do that with totally synthesized digital sounds. Like, I hope, you know, that little spiel just gives people like a bit of a kick in the butt that I wish I had when I was like deep stuck in that phase, because I felt like I was doing things wrong and like there was a correct way to do it and I hadn't figured it out. And if you can just shut that voice off in your head and literally just record and sample 100 things over the next month or two or whatever, and just bring it into your DAW and see what you can make with it, you'll have huge breakthroughs doing that, you know, and you'll learn stuff about your sound that you never would have thought of.
Amen.
Yeah, it's funny how like when you're like trying to learn all this stuff, that, you know, intermediate phase, you feel like the only right choice is getting it as perfect as possible. And as you get better, you start to realize like, no, actually, like the more imperfect stuff is the stuff that I'm drawn to now, the stuff that has feel, the stuff that is in the pocket, like all the shitty, broken sounding things are the ones that catch my ear now, rather than the overproduced perfect stuff. It just doesn't grab me.
Think about how many plugins are made specifically to make shit sound fucked up, like RC20 and Portal, and there's another couple of them that are the exact same plugin basically that I can't think of off top, but there's a whole market for like, oh, take this really nice clean sound and lo-fi the shit out of it by making it like warble and crackle and be weird and phasey for some reason. You know, it's like, you know, trying to emulate that sound of you sampled it off of warped vinyl record or whatever, like all of hip hop was built on like weird imperfections.
Yeah. Like the drip,
early
the
dance
drip
music,
plugin,
all that shit. Yeah. There you go. Drip.
Two clicks and it's broken.
Yeah.
Great.
2 clicks and it's fucked.
Yeah.
So I got a couple questions.
Yeah.
In here, Gym City Dad asks, so picking up a handful of different mics at a second-hand store might be a good idea? Sure. Like, if you get a cheap mic that you don't know what it is, experiment on it. Try recording different things through it. See what you like and what you don't like objectively from your point of view, because, again, that helps you make your sound. Like, if you're like, oh, man, this sounds great when I record hand percussion, but shitty when I record vocals, well, there you go. Nice. And then Mike E asked what I think is a really good question. Any tips on maintaining flow when recording yourself? He says he finds that he's wearing multiple hats when he's tracking himself. And yes, that can be a challenge because, as you know, if you got an engineer sitting there, all you got to do is be at the mic and focus on this. Whereas like, you might think, oh man, I got an engineer. I got to walk back over to the computer. I got to move the cursor back to the beginning and get the next track and then walk back over to the mic. I think one of the best ways is simply just loop recording. Set up a loop and press record and give yourself a little space on either end of the verse or chorus or whatever part you're recording. And just record the exact same thing over and over. Go all the way through. If you mess up, keep going. And then you can comp together the best take. Or you might nail the last take. And you're like, that's exactly what I want. Screw every take before this. But like just setting up a loop, hitting record, and then only being a vocalist for a bunch of takes in a row, and then saying, okay, cool, I think I got it. Now let me go be a producer and an engineer.
Amen. One thing that got me recording a bunch more is, so first tip I'd say is like when you're in that headspace, you gotta like stay on your own ass to like, to not get into editing mode when you're recording, for example. Like just tell yourself you're gonna record, 10 to 20 takes, and then you'll go back and comp it. Don't be doing both at the same time. One thing that really stuck out to me, I mentioned in the previous podcast, which I think will be out next week.
Yep.
In the interview with the engineer I Dream in Stereo, I mentioned a piece of advice that he had in the last video. But watching his interview, he's produced for like really big artists like Don Toliver, Tisa Korean, anybody that's like in that kind of like Houston rap kind of scene. Like Don Toliver's signed to Travis Scott, like he's dealing with like that kind of level of people. One question that he got asked was, what difference do you see between the artists that are successful, like the ones that end up popping off versus the ones that just stay local? And he said they are very they have accepted who they are as artists, and they just come in, record a couple takes, trust in the comping, and then move on to the next. And they don't come in and like start doubting choices too much. They know that this is just one song in their career. They come in, do it to the best of their abilities. Don't overthink shit. Let it be comped. They're mentally already on the next track while the engineer's wrapping this one up. So, when it comes to that, don't be so critical of what you're hearing any more than you need to get the next take. So, for example, a bad thought is, man, I absolutely fucking hate my voice. This is sounding like shit. I don't like this in the mix, blah, blah, blah. Versus if you're like, oh, I would like to pronounce this S slightly differently the next time around. That is a very constructive thing that I think you should think about in the moment. But all right, to bring it all around. So don't doubt yourself. And then one thing that really helped me was if I'm not recording final takes, I don't need to be in this room. I will gladly just lounge upstairs and have my laptop in my lap and my interface on the couch and the mic just freeform just next to me, and I'll just pick it up and record something whenever I have an idea. And a lot of my writing has been done like literally just laying back in my bed or sitting on the couch, especially when I was working. When I would come home exhausted from work, there's no way I want to sit in a chair. I want to kick back. I want to get some food. I want to watch some TV. Well, then I'd have my laptop on the couch next to me. I'd have a beat running. I'd be recording some vocals to it. And I'd just be taking more hits at bat. Fuck all the recording quality and the perfect space and all of that if it means that you're spending less time on the mic. More times hitting record and you doing stuff into the mic equals way better success rate than theoretically planning and measuring all the little different variables.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I'll also add on to that at least for me personally, it takes like, I'll record like a demo of I write something and then I record it and I'm like, okay, how did that sound? Almost invariably, the first time I record something in, I'm like, okay, you sound stiff as shit and you don't sound like you really give a fuck about this song or like how it feels. And like you wrote the lyrics with like a feeling in mind, right? So then step back up, hit record, put it on a loop, and then just like close your eyes. Like I'm probably like bouncing around a bit, like envisioning like how the lyrics feel, and then actually like go into it in the proper mindset. And then in that mode, I'm not thinking about anything production related. The first time I'm probably like, okay, I got to get the rhythm right. I got to get the words right. Like when I finally drop into the zone in which I'm able to record something that I like, it's normally because I'm like on a loop and I might screw up the same vocal phrase using the wrong word in the same spot 5 times in a row. but I'm dialing in like how it feels to say that phrase first. And then the next time around, like I finally actually get the word right. But the feel of it, being in the moment of like what that performance actually feels like, is so much more important than any other production, anything, any other pronunciation of this or that, or like getting the note perfect. Like when you're just like in the moment, like actually trying to live that thing that you wrote, or like truly like deliver that performance, it's much more about the way that you deliver it, the emotion behind it, and the intention. And that's what I've found to be successful out of anything, is stop tell myself to stop thinking about anything other than like just purely how it feels, like just all feel, not production, anything.
Yeah. I mean, I was just watching this, like, I don't know, it's a Netflix documentary about pop music, and the first episode was about Boyz II Men, and one of their big, huge records, like 14 weeks #1, was It's So Hard to Say Goodbye to Yesterday. And there's a point, like, at the end of a verse where the singer's voice cracks in the middle of his word. And he was like, yo, we got to redo this. But Babyface, who wrote the song and helped produce it and was there in the recording, was like, no, we fucking got it. That was the one for sure. He's like, but my voice cracked. He's like, yeah, but you're like, in the song, you're heartbroken. It makes sense that your voice would crack right when you're saying, like, won't you come back? Like whatever the line is, like it's okay to have I guess this is really the theme of the episode. It's okay and sometimes better to have these imperfections. And like Evan's saying, if the emotion's right, that's what really matters. Because that's what music is. It's a way to convey emotion. That's what art is. It's a way to convey emotion. Like, technique is important to the point that it helps you convey the emotion. But if you really convey the emotion and your technique's not perfect, it's better than the other way around.
100%.
Blue is talking in response to this Andrew Huang video where he goes in talking about how much he doesn't like his own voice and why he chooses to sing anyway. And I was just replying in the chat. I love that video because I think singing, just even if you don't do it in your music, singing melodies is going to help you internalize why certain things work. Same with like learning how to beatbox a little. Like all of this stuff is going to infinitely improve your phrasing because it's going to feel more natural. It's going to resonate more with the soul because our voices are our most powerful asset, like there's so many things you can do that don't include actually you putting your vocal in the final take of the track. You could do it just to get a phrasing idea out for your drop. So like we've talked about, literally just start a drop with wow, wow, and then just loop that and then put sounds to that. You could also sing in a melody that feels very, very nice and organic and then convert that to MIDI and then apply it to a synth. Like there's so many options you could do. And all of these are ways to like, when people come and they're like, I have creative block, what do I do? Or I'm feeling stuck or uninspired. It's like, man, there's so many sources of inspiration. Like even with just your voice, you can implement using your voice in the writing process and not even have your voice end up in the final version. Like really, like don't leave any stone unturned when it comes to this kind of stuff. And everybody's going to hate their own voice, like I still don't even want to hear my voice without compression and soothe on it and a touch of reverb. And that's just what it is. Everybody's going to not feel their own voice because it sounds different to you in your head than when you hear it recorded. But to everybody else, it sounds normal. So knowing that mental barrier is already like built in, I don't know if anybody needs to hear this advice, but I definitely cringed so hard for at least a year or two of recording myself into a microphone, and it was brutal. My ears literally bled, but pushed through it because there's so much cool vocal manipulation stuff you could do. All the techniques that we just mentioned, like it really opened up a lot of doors in my process, you know? So don't get caught up on hating your voice or your mic or anything like that, or how cringe it is. None of that.
Yeah. Gem City Dad has a good point. I want to sing, but I do not want to sing in my apartment. These walls too thin. Okay, I can relate. Until I had this studio that's in the backyard by itself, I really struggled with actually like being as loud as I wanted to and like actually committing to a delivery. But that being said, when I was in an apartment, it just took longer for me to be like, you know what? Fuck my goddamn people downstairs and next door. I don't even care if they hear me and hate me. I'm just gonna do it. And Tesco has a real good story about one of his apartment neighbors that I think will help you feel better about your situation.
Essentially, I had a next door neighbor who came to my door really fucked up, drunk one night to tell me how shit I am at singing, how I'm never going to have a future in singing, how why would I ever in the world think I could ever do this for real because I'm so bad. I don't know what the fuck she's up to. She's not a part of my life. Literally nobody in that building has ever called me to check up, to see how I'm doing. Nobody's ever knocked on my door to see, do I need anything? And fair enough, because I haven't for them. But the thing is, I gladly realized, you know, that it doesn't matter if I'm being judged and people are shit talking me or coming to my door to tell me I'm trash, because they're not in the bigger picture anyway. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe that's harder for some people to overcome, but like, just slap on headphones and, don't be disrespectful. But I'm just going to say you can get surprisingly loud without no noise complaints.
Yeah, I mean, like during the day, like as long as you're not doing it at 2 a.m, ultimately what it comes down to is, are you worried about the critique of your neighbor who you don't know, that does not matter, that is only doing that out of spite because they hate their life and don't want to see you succeed because they didn't succeed? Like hearing that, when you told us that story, I was almost like, I almost wish I lived in an apartment again so I could just like embody that and just go full force into like, I hope all my neighbors come over and tell me I can't sing. So then when this track comes out and people are like, wow, that actually sounds really good, I'm going to be like, you know what? I have a funny story about that. 3 out of my 4 neighbors across the walls or underneath me came up and told me that I should just quit. You know, like that kind of stuff is hilarious. And when you realize that, and I'm sure when you had that happen, you're like, wow, ouch. But that kind of forces you to realize like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And the thing about recording vocals is it takes you coming to the realization that it doesn't matter. Like if your neighbors hear you, like that is the 10% you're holding back that is going to make that recording not good. The moment that you can embrace the I don't care, I'm going to scream this vocal because it needs to be screamed, that is the take that is actually going to end up being great. When you hold nothing back, that is the take that's good. And who cares? Your neighbor is not your manager. It is not going to matter.
Yeah. Just accept that you're going to be absolute ass for a long time, and there's no reason anybody should be getting in your business anyway. You know, like obviously I wasn't being disrespectful to her, and as long as you're within reasonable hours, what's the difference between somebody turning on the washing machine and you going after your dreams? Fuck that. Right. Sing anyway. Just accept that you're gonna suck for a while, and you can still make some good shit happen in that time while you're learning your voice. If you can sort through the 90% cringe that you make in the beginning, there will be 10% that gives you hope, you know, for the future. That makes you not give a fuck about somebody coming to your door to tell you you're absolute ass because you believe in the process. And anybody that's been producing for a year or two or a couple, especially, like if you've seen the progress you've made in that time, then don't let being shit at the start hold you back from putting in more time, because you will get there.
Yeah. And like,
hey, Mike, thanks for the questions. You rock, man. Have
likewise.
a good one.
Like we were talking about, like if you come to the ultimate conclusion that like, I just can't record vocals in my apartment because you have a 70-year-old that texts you and calls you, and that's just not the vibe, and I can't get there. That, you know what? That's okay. That's fine. Now you just have different options. Are you trying to make music in which you could like real sultry and like depressed, like sing into the mic super close and get a vibe off that? Or you drive however many minutes it takes to get to a forest and you record like at night in the woods with a USB mic plugged into your laptop, and like then that becomes like a whole vibe that you can really center around for your stuff, you know? Like, again, just lean into the limitation that you have, and if truly like you can't record that thing, like figure out like a setting in which you could try, in which you would feel comfortable giving it 100%, and then at that point you could truly like feel like you gave it your all. Because trust me, I know what you mean by like in your apartment, it's so hard to actually remove that last 10% barrier of like fully going for it. It is so hard. So like in that case, maybe do try and find somewhere else that you could actually belt it.
Man, biggest breakthrough for me, your car is a amazing vocal booth, and you can literally just sit in your driveway or just park off somewhere and just practice for as long as you want. And man, like I still, if I need to record final vocals, it is hot as hell here, and I don't got a cooler for my laptop. I will literally go sweat it out in the car for 2-3 hours and just try to record all the takes I need for a song before my laptop runs out. That's after I've done my lounging back and my writing, you know, but just once I have all my takes, I need my proper recordings. I go into the car and I sweat my ass off and turn it into a sauna and record there, because I will be uninterrupted, great acoustics, all of that. And most people have a car, or they know a friend that has a car that isn't driving it all day, that they could, you know, probably buy a gram or two of weed for and just be like, yo, can I chill in your car? And Blue, I definitely pulled a lot of inspo from Billie Eilish early on, and worked with a lot of like softer tones to my voice when I was in an apartment, you know, and now that I've become more comfortable projecting and I have a space to do more of that stuff, I still find myself like mixing the two styles all the time. And like, you know, it's just like, you're not going to use your voice only one way. So better to be making some progress on the soft route and to start experimenting with it than to like hold back until like you can project. Like maybe that's not even your style, you know?
Yeah. When it comes down to it, man, like singing's about confidence. Like you just got to send it, you know? You know, you can send it quiet or loud, but like, do you want to do this? Like, you know, people are like, oh, what if my neighbors hear me and they get pissed? Or what if somebody makes fun of me? Like, what if they hear your beat and they don't like it? What if they come to your job and they complain about something you did? What if? Who gives a fuck? We're not out here to be perfect. We're not out here to please everybody. We're out here to live the life we want to live, which is apparently making weird music on our computers. So do it. Do it all the way. Just fucking sing into a mic. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't work, also awesome. More often than not, the shit I do doesn't work. And that's okay. Because I just keep doing shit until some shit works. And the more you do it, the easier it gets to give zero fucks.
Yeah.
That's a muscle. Just like singing's a muscle, not giving fucks is a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger you are.
It's very true.
That's big facts. One really useful thing too, I won't do it now because everybody is sleeping, but literally just go like, whoa, yeah, like you just took like a fat line of coke or some crazy shit. Like you're just off the rocker.
You are Motley Crue.
Yeah, like literally like your Motley Crue. Just act like an idiot and just be super loud for a sec. And then you can mentally be like, I know I will not do anything nearly as stupid or as loud for the next 3 hours. It actually is like quite a liberating thought.
That's a good tip.
Set your
That's
threshold higher. Yeah.
I would do that when I was in the apartment.
Dude, that'll loosen you up. Yeah, that's great. Actually, I'm gonna start doing that too.
Woo!
Because that helps break down that barrier of like going all in too, right? If you're just like, it puts you in the right mindset to get there. I like that.
Totally. Yeah, the more you do it too, and you get an idea of how you like to process like certain things too. Like, I definitely feel like my voice has improved at that time, but now I also know like with the processing, kind of what to expect in the end result. Like, same with when I'm doing guitars and stuff. You know, I know I'm gonna brighten it up a bit more when I bring it into the DAW. So, just gives me different insight into like, do I actually need a lead layer on top? Do I have room for more vocal layers? Do I actually like want this here? Was that vocal take actually good enough to fit in the track, or do I need to keep retracking it? Like literally just the more at bats you have, let's say there's 10 variables to the process. For 1 month, you're going to have 3 breakthroughs, and all of these like skills are going to be going up. Kind of like in a video game, you're assigning all your skill points to these 3. Then in the next month, you listen to that interview with your favorite artist, or maybe you rewatch this episode and a different part of it resonates with you. And then you focus on these 2 or 3 areas, and you slowly start bringing everything up to match with each other. And it's like, maybe you're not Michael Jackson level at singing, but you can still make something work with your voice, maybe by just learning something about layering and vocal processing. And maybe those 3 things are your specific combo to get your sound across, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, obviously, the more you know, the better. But it's not even how much you know as much as it is how you apply all of these things that make you into one palatable sound after.
Yeah, 100%.
Amen.
And you can always produce yourself into the right notes with Melodyne, auto-tune, all this stuff. You can always produce yourself into the right notes, but you can't produce yourself into an authentic recording. So like Luke said, you just got to send it. You just do.
Send it.
Just send it.
I feel like that's a pretty good wrap.
That sounds like a bow to me.
Yeah, and the chat is starting to slow down, so I think
big up chat for rocking with us.
Very big ups to all of y'all.
Big up chat.
Thank you. Gym City Dad, good luck on getting that house. Appreciate all y'all for your questions and comments and fun gifts. Yeah, so peace out, humans.
Much
and guess
love,
what
everybody.
else? Peace among worlds.
Woo.
Woo.
Thanks for tuning in, though. Love you.
All right, humans. That was awesome. Appreciate y'all listening and staying all the way to the end. Make sure you smash that subscribe, the like, leave a comment. If you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a rating and review. It really does help us get to more cool producers just like you. And of course, tell a friend. Follow us at The Human Music Podcast everywhere but Twitter, where we are at Human Music Pod. And take a minute, click those links below, support our sponsors. Dojo TV, we recorded this podcast there, and a bunch of other Producer Dojo Senseis do free live stream classes over there. And there's a dope Discord chat associated with it where you can learn a lot and meet a lot of cool producers. The weekly download, that's Ill Gates' private weekly group lessons. It's just $20 a month, but you get a new episode every single week. You can hop in the chat with Ill Gates and have access to over 230 more episodes in the archive instantly when you sign up. Finally, guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. He's the best engineer we know, and your first class over there is free. One more time, the song of the week is Luke Rain and Trap Jesus walk on water, because hey, who says you can't collab with yourself? Check the link for that below too. I've even got some behind the scenes info on how the song came about and why the hell I am even collabing with myself on it. If you're interested in that, check the links below, and we will be back at you next week, humans, with episode 67, whatever the hell it's about, because we ain't recorded it yet. All right, peace, and peace among worlds. I like it.